Picture dialing for an ambulance during a medical emergency only to hear that the weather is too dangerous for a flight, so you'll have to wait until tomorrow. Picture paying $28 for a single head of lettuce. Picture living through 4 straight months without ever seeing the sun. Now picture choosing that lifestyle willingly instead of having no alternative. Canada is home to 292 remote and isolated communities. Among them, 96 have absolutely no road access and likely never will. Every person, every supply, and every essential service arrives by aircraft. Roughly 200,000 people live in these communities, with nearly 80% belonging to Indigenous populations whose ancestors have lived on these lands for thousands of years, places that most Canadians could not even locate on a map. That raised one question I could not ignore. Why would anyone remain in a place where a jug of milk costs $18? The closest hospital is more than 1,000 kilometers away. The sun disappears for months at a time, and freezing temperatures can become deadly within minutes. The explanations I discovered were nothing like I had imagined. These are 12 of Canada's most isolated communities, and the genuine reasons their residents continue to call them home. Number 12, Grise Fiord. Population, 130. Location, the southern coast of Ellesmere Island, Nunavut, Canada's northernmost permanently inhabited civilian settlement. The nearest hospital is located in Iqaluit, roughly 1,160 kilometers away. That distance is accurate. If someone suffers a heart attack in Grise Fiord, their chances of survival often depend on whether the weather allows a medical evacuation flight to land. A 4-liter jug of milk typically costs between $16 and $20. A round-trip flight to Ottawa can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. During January, average temperatures range from -35 degrees C to -40 degrees C. From late October until the middle of February, the sun never rises above the horizon. That means nearly 4 months of complete polar darkness. Take a moment to think about that. The remarkable part is that Grise Fiord was never supposed to become a permanent community. In 1953, the Canadian government relocated Inuit families from northern Quebec and Pond Inlet to the high Arctic. Officially, the relocation was described as a way to ease pressure on hunting grounds. In reality, it was largely intended to strengthen Canada's Arctic sovereignty during the Cold War. The families were assured that hunting opportunities would be better and that they could return home if they were unhappy. Neither promise was fulfilled. In 2010, the Government of Canada officially apologized for the High Arctic Relocation Program, which is now recognized as one of the darkest chapters in the country's history. Yet the descendants of those relocated families decided to remain. 3 generations later, what began as a place of forced exile has become a homeland that residents proudly defend. One elder whose family experienced the original relocation explained it this way: "They brought us here against our will, but our children and grandchildren decided to stay. That means something. This is our land now." Today, the community supports itself through government employment, traditional subsistence hunting, and extraordinary resilience. Traditional country foods, including seal, muskox, narwhal, and Arctic char, are far more than cultural traditions. They are essential sources of food, allowing families to survive despite the extremely high prices found in local stores. Everyone knows one another personally. When someone faces hardship, neighbors step in to help. Ironically, the community's isolation from the outside world has created an exceptionally strong sense of unity within it. Moving on to number 11, Old Crow, Yukon. Population, 245. Old Crow is the only community in Yukon that has no road leading to it. The only way to reach it is by air. Located roughly 800 kilometers north of Whitehorse, it lies above the Arctic Circle. A round-trip flight typically costs between $800 and $1,200. Everyday groceries are generally priced at 2 to 3 times what people would pay in Whitehorse. If someone needs hospital care, the nearest facility is an 800-kilometer flight away. What truly separates Old Crow from Grise Fiord is its history. Unlike Grise Fiord, Old Crow was not established because of a government relocation program. The Vuntut Gwich'in people have lived on this land for at least 20,000 years. That is not an exaggeration. Archaeological discoveries at the nearby Bluefish Caves contain the oldest confirmed evidence of human activity ever found in Canada. So when residents say, "This is our home," they are referring to a bond with this land that stretches back roughly 15,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids were even built. Old Crow stands on territory where no permanent road has ever existed. Think about that for a moment. For nearly 20,000 years, people have continuously lived here, yet there is still no permanent road connecting the community to the rest of Canada. The settlement exists because of the porcupine caribou herd, one of the largest migratory caribou populations in North America. Around 200,000 animals travel through this region every year. The Gwich'in people proudly refer to themselves as the Caribou people, and that title is far more than symbolism. Whenever the caribou migrate through the area, the entire community joins the hunt. It provides food security, preserves cultural traditions, and reinforces their identity all at the same time. Old Crow also offers something unique. It is a self-governing First Nation community that manages its own affairs. The Vuntut Gwich'in successfully negotiated both their land claim and their self-government agreement. They operate their own government, oversee their own educational system through Chief Zedze Gitlet School, where Gwich'in language, history, and traditions are woven directly into the curriculum, and administer their own health programs. Children grow up speaking the Gwich'in language, learning traditional land-based skills, and developing a strong understanding of who they are and where they belong. One young mother who moved back after attending university explained it perfectly. She left for British Columbia to pursue higher education, where she experienced culture shock and deep homesickness. After graduating, she chose to return home and raise her children in Old Crow. Today, her children hunt caribou alongside their uncles and grandfather. They speak Gwich'in every day. She willingly traded concerts, restaurants, and shopping malls for something she realized could never be replaced. The difficulties, however, are undeniable. The long winter darkness is challenging. Employment opportunities are limited. Nearly everything that must be flown into the community comes with an extremely high price tag. Climate change is creating an even greater concern by altering the migration routes of the porcupine caribou herd, threatening the very foundation of traditional Gwich'in life. An elder and former chief who helped lead the community through its land claims negotiations summed it up best. "We are the caribou people. As long as the caribou continue to come, we will remain here." That leaves community leaders with one difficult question that keeps them awake at night. What happens if the caribou stop coming? Number 10 brings us to Nain, Labrador. Population 1,125. Nain is the northernmost permanent community in Newfoundland and Labrador. Located along the northern coast of Labrador, it has no road connection to the rest of the province. You can reach Nain by taking one of the daily flights from Happy Valley, Goose Bay, located about 370 kilometers away, or by using the coastal ferry service during the summer season. A round-trip flight to Goose Bay usually costs between $700 and $900, while flying to St. John's typically costs $1,500 or even more. A bag of flour that sells for around $12 in St. John's can easily cost $25 or higher in Nain. What truly sets Nain apart is its role in modern Canadian history. It serves as the administrative capital of Nunatsiavut. Established in 2005, Nunatsiavut became Canada's first self-governing Inuit region. After generations marked by colonization, forced displacement, and the trauma of residential schools, Labrador Inuit now oversee their own government from this isolated coastal community. The Nunatsiavut Government Administration Building in Nain is among the most advanced government facilities anywhere north of Goose Bay. It stands as a powerful example of Indigenous self-government in action rather than just an idea. Nain also serves as the primary gateway to Tongat Mountains National Park, one of Canada's most breathtaking and least visited national parks. Polar bears are a regular part of life here. In fact, the Tongat region has one of the highest concentrations of polar bears anywhere in the world. When local residents discuss the realities of living in Nain, staying safe around polar bears is a genuine concern. It is every bit as serious as it sounds. The scenery surrounding the community is extraordinary. Across the water, the towering peaks of the Tongat Mountains dominate the horizon. Rocky barrens, the northern edge of the boreal forest, deep fjords, and countless islands create a landscape unlike almost anywhere else in Canada. Tourists spend thousands of dollars to experience this place for just a few days. The people who live here wake up to these views every single morning. One middle-aged hunter, who also works part-time as a tourism guide, described his life this way. "The land provides everything I need. I hunt caribou, harvest seals, catch fish, and keep my freezer full to feed my family. I guide visitors who come to see polar bears, and I'm still home in time for dinner. Try doing that in Toronto." He once moved to Happy Valley, Goose Bay for work, but eventually returned because he missed both the coastline and the traditional hunting lifestyle. A young professional who came back after graduating from university to work for the Nunatsiavut government explained her decision differently. "In St. John's, I was simply another anonymous person. Here, people know me, and the work I do has a real impact. That means more to me than fast food restaurants and nightlife." Of course, life in Nain comes with real challenges. The social scene is limited. Dating opportunities are few. Internet service can be slow and unreliable. Everyone understands that any serious medical emergency requires an air ambulance evacuation. Even so, she believes she is helping build something meaningful. Nunatsiavut is governed by Labrador Inuit themselves. Now let's move to number 9, Fort Chipewyan, Alberta. Population 845. Fort Chipewyan, often shortened to Fort Chip, is Alberta's oldest European established settlement. It was founded in 1788, nearly 100 years before Alberta officially became a province. That makes it older than every major city in Western Canada. Yet, even after 237 years, it still does not have a permanent year-round road connection. Fort Chipewyan sits along the western shore of Lake Athabasca, one of Canada's largest lakes, approximately 220 kilometers north of Fort McMurray. You can fly there throughout the entire year, with the flight taking roughly 30 minutes. Another option is traveling over the seasonal ice road, but it is only usable for about 6 to 8 weeks each winter, usually sometime between December and March. Another way to reach Fort Chipewyan during the warmer months is by traveling along the Athabasca River by boat. The seasonal ice road is far more than a convenience. It is essential for the community's survival. During the short period when transport trucks are able to reach the settlement, residents purchase and store as many supplies as possible for the months ahead. However, climate change has steadily reduced the length of the ice road season. Over the past 5 decades, what once lasted between 8 and 10 weeks has been shortened to roughly 6 to 8 weeks. Spring thaw now arrives earlier, while freeze-up in the fall begins later than it once did. Many residents worry that one day even this temporary winter connection may no longer be dependable. The community also has a complicated relationship with Alberta's oil sands industry. Fort McMurray serves as the region's main center, and the oil sands provide the largest source of employment. Some people from Fort Chipewyan work rotational schedules at oil sands operations, earning strong incomes before returning home to continue fishing and hunting. Others, however, are deeply worried about the environmental impact of industrial development farther upstream. Many elders say the fish no longer taste the way they once did after watching changes occur throughout the Peace, Athabasca Delta over several decades. That ongoing conflict between economic opportunity and environmental protection shapes much of life in the community. Number 8. Kugluktuk, Nunavut. Population 1,491. Kugluktuk is located where the Coppermine River empties into the Arctic Ocean. It is the westernmost community in Nunavut. The closest road-connected city is Yellowknife, approximately 870 kilometers away by air. A round-trip flight generally costs between $1,500 and $2,000. A jug of milk typically sells for around $12 to $15. What makes Kugluktuk especially remarkable is its history. The Copper Inuit, or Inuit, have lived in this region for thousands of years. Their name comes from their historic use of naturally occurring native copper found in the area to manufacture tools. Before Europeans arrived in North America, this represented one of the only known indigenous metalworking traditions anywhere north of Mexico. Today, the land continues to provide for local residents. Diamond and gold mines located nearby employ many people, who often work rotational schedules before returning home to hunt caribou using traditional skills and knowledge that have been passed down through countless generations. It is a place where ancient traditions and modern industry exist side by side. One resident, who divides his time between mine work and traditional hunting, explained it this way. Where else could I earn this kind of income while still hunting caribou? The mine provides good wages, and whenever I'm off shift, I'm out on the land. He admitted that mining is not without its problems. Even so, it allows many people to remain in their home community instead of relocating permanently to larger cities. There is one growing concern shared by nearly everyone. The local caribou herds have been declining, and that uncertainty worries the entire community. Number 7. Pond Inlet, Nunavut. Population 1,617. If there is one community that could be called the most beautiful in the Canadian Arctic, Pond Inlet would certainly be among the strongest candidates. Located on northern Baffin Island, along Eclipse Sound, directly across from Bylot Island, the community is surrounded by towering mountains, massive glaciers, and during the summer months, roughly 300 drifting icebergs on any given day. That is not an exaggeration. Enormous blocks of glacial ice, breaking away from Greenland and Baffin Island, float through this region, creating one of the world's most spectacular concentrations of icebergs. Residents wake up each morning to scenery that wildlife and nature documentaries spend millions of dollars trying to capture on film. The Inuit name for Pond Inlet is Mitamatalik, meaning the place where Mitama is buried. The people of this community identify themselves as Mitamatalik, the people of this land. Their ancestors have lived here continuously for thousands of years. One of the community's greatest cultural traditions revolves around the narwhal. Pond Inlet is widely recognized for its annual narwhal hunt. Every summer, these remarkable creatures, often called the unicorns of the sea because of their long spiral tusks, migrate through the surrounding waters. Local hunters pursue them using traditional methods that have been passed from one generation to the next for centuries. The harvested muktuk, the raw skin and blubber of the narwhal, is shared throughout the community, continuing a tradition of collective food sharing that has existed for as long as the culture itself. Tourism has also become an increasingly important part of the local economy. Pond Inlet serves as the main gateway to Surmalik National Park. During the summer months, cruise ships arrive carrying visitors, while adventure travelers spend thousands of dollars for the opportunity to witness icebergs, polar bears, and narwhals in their natural environment. A young Inuk tourism guide explained what this change has meant for the community. Tourism is creating new opportunities that allow us to stay here. I introduce visitors to our homeland and our traditions. I earn a living by sharing the culture I love. His grandmother endured the residential school system. His mother helped rebuild and preserve their culture. Now he is introducing that same culture to people from around the world. That's progress, he said. An elder who has spent more than 50 years hunting narwhal possesses an extraordinary amount of traditional knowledge about sea ice, weather conditions, and animal behavior. His reason for remaining in Pond Inlet was straightforward. The narwhal brought our people here. They are the reason we continue to stay. When I'm standing at the edge of the sea ice waiting for the narwhal, I'm doing exactly what my grandfather did and what his grandfather did before him. Why would I ever leave that behind? Even so, he expressed concern. The sea ice is changing. It has become far less predictable than it once was, making hunting increasingly dangerous. Climate change, he said, is what worries him most for the sake of his grandchildren. The community continues to face many familiar hardships. The cost of living is extremely high. There is an ongoing housing shortage. Many homes are overcrowded. A round-trip flight to Ottawa costs roughly $4,000. Fresh fruits and vegetables are difficult to obtain. The long polar night during winter places a heavy psychological burden on many residents. Mental health services remain limited, while suicide rates continue to be tragically high. Yet, as the elder put it, the South has almost everything, but not the things that truly matter. We already have what matters. Number 6, Paulatuck, Northwest Territories. Population, 265. Even by Northern Canadian standards, Paulatuck is exceptionally remote. The community is located on the Arctic coast along Darnley Bay, approximately 400 kilometers by air from Inuvik, which itself is far from being a major city. A round-trip flight to Inuvik generally costs between $800 and $1,200. Flying to Yellowknife usually costs $2,000 or more. Paulatuck is also the gateway to Tuktut Nogate National Park, a protected wilderness famous for its spectacular canyons and waterfalls that very few people will ever see in person. There is an ironic reality about both Paulatuck and Tuktut Nogate National Park. Paulatuck is considered the community with access to the park. Yet there is no road leading there. The only way to enter the park is by chartered aircraft or by completing a multi-day hike beginning in Paulatuck itself. The park protects the calving grounds of the Bluenose caribou herd, the very same herd that the people of Paulatuck have depended on and hunted for thousands of years. It is a place where conservation and traditional harvesting exist together in a direct and balanced relationship. The very people whose lives depend on the caribou also live beside the protected lands that ensure the herd's survival. The Inuvialuit community here is closely connected in a way that is difficult to describe to anyone who has never lived in a place like this. With a population of only 265, everyone knows everyone else. Whenever a person needs assistance, the entire community steps in to help. That is the Inuvialuit way, as one local resident explained. A hunter and guide who has spent his entire life in Paulatuck shared why he has never wanted to leave. This is my home, the caribou, the beluga, the land, everything I need is right here. Why would I choose to live anywhere else? He went on to say, the South has shopping stores, we have the land. He already knows which one he would rather have. The hardships are very real. The cost of living is extremely high. Public services are limited. Being so far away from advanced medical care can be frightening. Satellite internet is both slow and expensive. Outside the community itself, cell phone coverage is practically non-existent. Throughout the winter, long periods of darkness and intense cold greatly reduce the amount of time people can safely spend outdoors. Whenever poor weather prevents airplanes from landing, the community becomes completely isolated from the outside world. There have been tragic medical emergencies in which people could not be evacuated because weather conditions made flights impossible. Even so, the traditional economy continues to function successfully here. Caribou and beluga provide a significant portion of the community's food supply. The land continues to support its people just as it has done for thousands of years. For those who truly belong to this way of life, there is no traffic, no constant stress, and very little crime. You wake up each day and head out onto the land. That is simply the way of life. Not everyone is able to cope with the isolation, the months of darkness, or the limited services. But those who remain have discovered something valuable enough to make every sacrifice worthwhile.
Manitoba. The population is 350. This is one of the most isolated communities in Manitoba, accessible only by plane, approximately 500 kilometers by air from Thompson. A round-trip flight costs $800 to $1,200. No road has ever reached to Dual Lake. Let me explain why this community exists, and you will understand why people stay. In 1956, the Canadian government forcibly relocated the Sayisi Dene from their traditional lands at Little Duck Lake to Churchill, Manitoba. The government said it was to improve their lives and to save declining caribou herds. What followed was catastrophic. Families were dumped near the town garbage dump. They had no housing, no employment, no support. They were torn from the caribou hunting grounds that had sustained them for thousands of years. Hundreds died from exposure, disease, starvation, and violence over the following years. It has been called Canada's hidden genocide. The survivors eventually founded to Dual Lake in 1973, choosing this remote site to be near the caribou again. Let that sink in. After near extinction, the Sayisi Dene chose to rebuild in another isolated location rather than assimilate into towns. They walked back toward the land. An elder who was a child during the 1956 relocation, who lost family members to the conditions in Churchill, and who helped establish to Dual Lake, explained that the government moved them once and nearly destroyed them. He said they moved themselves here, and they are rebuilding. And this is ours. Today, every resident living here is making a statement that the Sayisi Dene endured and continue. They call themselves the Caribou Eaters. The caribou is their life, food, clothing, tools, identity. Where the caribou go, they follow. Dene language is actively spoken and taught. Traditional hunting practices continue. Ceremonies persist. The community has chosen cultural survival in one of the most challenging environments imaginable. The challenges are immense. Extreme cost of living with everything flown in. Very limited employment. Housing conditions that vary. Distance from all services. Intergenerational trauma from the relocation is profound. Rates of suicide and addiction are tragically high. As in many Indigenous communities, the caribou herds are declining, an existential threat to a community that defines itself by its relationship to these animals. But the resilience is extraordinary. The elders who survived the relocation are still here. Their grandchildren speak Dene. They built this place after understand why people stay. In 1956, the Canadian government forcibly relocated the Sayisi Dene from their traditional lands at Little Duck Lake to Churchill, Manitoba. The government said it was to improve their lives and to save declining caribou herds. What followed was catastrophic. Families were dumped near the town garbage dump. They had no housing, no employment. The population is 350. This is one of the most isolated communities in Manitoba, accessible only by plane, approximately 500 kilometers by air from Thompson. A round-trip flight costs $800 to $1,200. No road has ever reached to Dual Lake. Let me explain why this community exists, and you will understand family members to the conditions in Churchill, and who helped establish to Dual Lake, explained that the government moved them once and nearly destroyed them. He said they moved themselves here, and they are rebuilding, and this is ours. Today, every resident living here is making a statement that the Saisi Dene endured and continue. They call themselves the Caribou Eaters. The caribou is their life, food, clothing, tools, identity. Where the caribou go, they follow. Dene language is actively spoken and taught. Traditional hunting practices continue. Ceremonies persist. The community has chosen cultural survival in one of the no support. They were torn from the caribou hunting grounds that had sustained them for thousands of years. Hundreds died from exposure, disease, starvation, and violence over the following years. It has been called Canada's hidden genocide. The survivors eventually founded Tadoule Lake in 1973, choosing this remote site to be near the caribou again. Let that sink in. After near extinction, the Saisi Dene chose to rebuild in another isolated location rather than assimilate into towns. They walked back toward the land. An elder who was a child during the 1956 relocation, who lost.
Number 44 is not truly a town at all, yet it may represent the most extreme example of isolation anywhere in Canada. Alert Nunavut. Population between 55 and 100, depending on the season. Location, Ellesmere Island, 82 degrees 30 north latitude. This is the northernmost permanently inhabited place anywhere on Earth. Alert is located 817 kilometers from the North Pole. If you were to walk directly north from Alert, the next landmass you would eventually reach would be the northern coast of Russia. That journey would require crossing the North Pole and then continuing for another 3,000 kilometers. The average annual temperature is degrees C. During winter, the average temperature drops to minus 32 degrees C, while wind chill makes it feel even colder. From October through February, the sun never rises above the horizon. From April through August, it never sets. Alert was established in 1950 as a signals intelligence station during the Cold War. Personnel stationed there monitored Soviet communications that reflected off the ionosphere. Today, Alert serves both as a military surveillance installation and as the northernmost weather station on Earth. The climate records collected here stretch back for decades and provide real-time evidence documenting climate change. What truly separates Alert from every other place on this list is one important fact. No one chooses to make it their permanent home. Military personnel are assigned there on 6-month rotations. Employees working at the weather station also rotate in and out. Researchers stay only for short periods before leaving again. Psychological screening is mandatory before anyone is assigned there because the environment is naturally demanding. The months-long polar night means living without sunlight. People spend months sharing close quarters with the same group of roughly 50 people. Facilities are limited. Entertainment options are minimal. Once a rotation begins, there is virtually no way to leave except in the event of an emergency evacuation. When severe weather grounds aircraft, people can remain stranded for extended periods. Medical emergencies in Alert are truly frightening. A military technician who had completed one of the station's rotations described what the experience was like. He said, "You cannot truly describe Alert to someone who has never been there. It tears you down, then builds you into someone different. I was not the same person when I left as I was when I first arrived." According to him, the endless darkness was the greatest challenge. By the third month of the polar night, nearly everyone begins to struggle mentally. Even so, he volunteered to return for another rotation. He discovered something in the silence. He discovered something in the bitter cold. He discovered something in the feeling of standing at the absolute edge of the world. He experienced northern lights unlike anything found anywhere else. He experienced the deep friendships that develop when people endure extreme conditions together. He walked across the frozen Arctic Ocean, and he earned the satisfaction and the bragging rights of being able to say that he had actually done it. Alert represents the absolute limit of what human beings are capable of enduring. It is not really a place where people decide to remain permanently. Nobody does. Instead, it demonstrates what true isolation looks like in its most extreme form. Now let's move on to number 3. Bella Coola, British Columbia. Population, approximately 2,500 people throughout the valley. This community is different. Bella Coola actually has a road. But there is an important story behind that road. When the government of British Columbia refused to construct one, the residents decided to build it themselves. Beginning in 1953, local people carved what became known as the Freedom Road through the surrounding mountains, using their own machinery, equipment, and labor. That included the infamous downhill section, simply called the Hill. This 40-kilometer stretch drops approximately 1,500 meters, reaches grades of up to 18%, has no guardrails, and features numerous tight switchbacks that have forced many RV drivers to turn around before attempting the descent. Even today, driving that road remains a true test of commitment. Anyone who lives in Bella Coola has, by definition, successfully driven down the hill at least once. In many ways, it acts as a filter that discourages anyone who is not truly committed to living there. The valley sits at the head of a fjord and is surrounded by towering mountains. It forms part of the Great Bear Rainforest, one of the last remaining intact temperate rainforests anywhere on Earth. Grizzly bears gather along the rivers to catch salmon. Because of that, the region has become one of the finest bear viewing destinations in all of North America. The Nuksauk Nation has lived in this valley for thousands of years. Today's community is a mixture of roughly 40% Nuksauk people, descendants of Norwegian settlers, and more recent newcomers who were drawn by the area's extraordinary scenery. One newcomer, who now operates an ecotourism business, explained her perspective very simply. She said, "The hill isn't an obstacle, it's a filter. It keeps away the people who aren't truly committed to living here." I am. She drove down the hill, looked across the valley, and immediately thought, "This is where I belong." Number 2, Francois, Newfoundland. Population 73. This tiny and isolated settlement is tucked inside a fjord along Newfoundland's south coast, completely surrounded by steep cliffs. Constructing a road connection is simply not geographically possible. The landscape does not allow it. The only way to reach Francois is by taking the provincial ferry from Hermitage. Hermitage is located about 20 kilometers away, and the ferry journey takes approximately 45 minutes. The government of Newfoundland and Labrador has repeatedly offered residents of Francois financial incentives to relocate through its community relocation program. Time after time, the community has declined those offers. Despite the isolation, despite the aging population, despite the limited access to health care, 73 people have decided that this fjord, these traditional saltbox homes, and the view surrounding them are worth far more than the convenience of living somewhere easier. An elderly fisherman whose family has called this place home for 4 generations explained, "They have attempted to relocate us 3 different times. Every single time we refused. They'll have to carry me out of here," he said. A retired woman who spent 4 decades living in St. John's before returning to the house where her family had always lived now begins every morning with a cup of coffee while gazing across the fjord. To her, that view is paradise. She walked away from a city career to return here. In her eyes, the decision was absolutely worth it. She is finally back where she belongs. The community is steadily growing older. Many young residents leave in search of education and employment opportunities, and the majority never come back. Over the past several decades, the population has fallen from more than 200 residents to just 73. Medical emergencies are one of the community's greatest fears. When the weather cooperates, a helicopter becomes the community's lifeline. When storms arrive, all anyone can do is wait. Yet the people who continue living here have made a deliberate decision. If they leave, Francois will cease to exist. Someone has to keep the community alive. They chose to become those people. And finally, we arrive at number 1, Fogo Island, Newfoundland. Population, 2,244. This may be the most unexpected community on this entire list, not because it is the most isolated, but because of the way its residents responded to that isolation. Fogo Island lies just off the northeastern coast of Newfoundland and is connected to the mainland by a ferry service. When the cod fishing moratorium came into effect in 1992, it appeared inevitable that the island would become yet another abandoned outport. Young people were moving away. The fishing industry had collapsed. The government was offering financial incentives for people to relocate. Fogo Island seemed to be dying. Instead, Zita Cobb, a native of Fogo Island who had left at the age of 18 and eventually built a successful career as a technology executive, came back home and established the Shorefast Foundation. Music. She went on to build the Fogo Island Inn, an extraordinary piece of modern architecture that has become an internationally recognized destination for affluent travelers from across the globe. Rooms begin at $2,000 per night. That is not a typo. The inn employs more than 75 people, the majority of them local residents. Every dollar of profit is invested back into the community. It is perhaps the most unlikely economic success story in Newfoundland's history. A struggling fishing community found new life through luxury tourism and social enterprise. The entire transformation was created by people who refused to watch their hometown disappear. A fisherman whose family has lived on Fogo Island for generations witnessed the complete transformation. They told us to leave. We stayed. Now we are famous. It turns out we understood something they didn't. Artists from around the world are now attracted by residency programs. Young people are beginning to return. After decades of decline, the population has finally stabilized. Traditional skills such as quilting, wooden boat building, and other heritage crafts have experienced a revival. A young professional who had been working in Halifax before returning to join the Shorefast Foundation explained the decision this way. I never imagined I would come back. But what is happening here is truly special. This is a community that refused to disappear. I wanted to be part of that. The challenges, however, are still very real. The ferry timetable controls much of daily life. Dating opportunities remain limited. The winter season can feel incredibly long. Yet Fogo Island demonstrates an important truth. Isolation does not automatically mean a community is destined to die. Communities have the ability to shape their own future. What connects every place on this list is not simply geography or hardship. It is the power of choice. The people living in Grise Fiord, Old Crow, Nain, Fort Chipewyan, Kugluktuk, Pond Inlet, Paulatuck, Tadul Lake, Bella Coola, Francois, and Fogo Island have all answered exactly the same question. What is a place worth? Their answers are very different from the ones most of us would probably give. They have exchanged convenience for community. They have traded accessibility for meaningful connection. They have chosen silence over possessions. Perhaps they are crazy. Or perhaps they have discovered something that the rest of us are still searching for. Belonging. What would you be willing to trade for a completely different way of living? If you have ever visited or lived in any of these communities, please share your experience in the comments. I would genuinely like to know what I got right, what I misunderstood, and what I may have overlooked. Thank you for watching.